Nothing in the gate bias.
To win the Louis Vuitton Cup and become the challenger for the 37th America's Cup means being the first to win 7 races. Based on the opening day's racing last Thursday, that could take a while. If it goes down to the wire, that's 13 races. The battle between this team, Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli and Ineos Britannia, saw the Italians take the first victory, followed by the British in the second. Both races were close, very close. Just seconds separated them, just one small mistake. The racing also took place in top-end conditions, where for the first time in this event, the start had to be delayed because the wind limit was exceeded. But it was the sea state that really pushed both teams. With waves over 1.5 meters, this was the biggest that either had raced in. The British admitted after the race that they'd only been out in these kind of conditions once before, and not in a race. Today's conditions look more settled, with a forecast of 6 to 10 knots. But it seems that in the right conditions, the sea breeze can punch right through that. There's been plenty of chatter down here in Barcelona about how teams coped with the conditions, but also how they've adapted their game through the event so far. Ineos were the best and most recent example. In race 1, their boat looked twitchy on its foils. In race 2, Britannia was way more settled. Ben Ainsley said that they didn't change anything, but instead they regrouped and modified the way they sailed the boats. I wouldn't mind betting that their pitwall team back at the Mercedes F1 base in Brackley had some suggestions that involved a few upgrades. The Italians are also very capable of mending and upgrading their Silver Dream racer. In the first race in the Louis Vuitton final, this team's performance looked very different to what we saw in the latter stages of the round robin. So while everyone is asking everyone else down there who they think will win, the truth is no one knows, and a view is often based on hope rather than hard evidence. When teams can learn and adapt this quickly in conditions that they've barely experienced themselves, it says a great deal about the level and nature of the competition this time around. And that's what's going to make today another fascinating one. For Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli, this is their 8th Cup campaign. They've made it through to the Cup match twice, most recently in 2021. They know what it feels like to succeed, but they also know what it feels like to suffer a bruising defeat. And as the saying goes, it's what you learn in defeat that often makes you stronger. And having followed them from the dockside in 6 of those 8 campaigns, it's clear to me that this time around Luna Rossa are the most settled, comfortable and confident that I've ever seen them. That will make them a very difficult team to beat. And if you've got any doubt about that, the daily dockouts make it clear what the mood is in the team right now. After the big send-off from both team bases, the weather hit the pause button and the day started with a delay as the breeze hovered below the 6.5 knot limit. This couldn't have been a more different start to the second day of racing in the finals. 2 days, 2 delays, but at opposite ends of the wind limits. Talk about testing the full range of both teams. But eventually, as the sea breeze built, thanks to the thermals inland, racing got underway. And when it did, just after 4 o'clock, conditions were still patchy and puffy. Staying on the foils was the first task. This meant there was no engagement between the 2 teams in the pre-start. Ineos got off to the better start at the favoured committee boat end of the line, while Luna Rossa was at the pin end. The first cross came at the boundary, where the British managed to take control, tacking on top of the Italians. Halfway up the beat, they were 200 metres ahead. But while Ineos rounded 19 seconds ahead, the Italians took the opposite gate mark, split with the Brits, got a puff and took the lead. Then, when the two were both on starboard and the Italians ahead, the British scored a puff and then rolled over the top of them to take the lead back. Over the next lap, the British pulled out an 800-metre lead, with Luna Rossa 1 minute 13 seconds behind. But on the fifth leg, the breeze dropped and the margin got swallowed up. The British had a tricky tack and managed to stay on their foils just, but the margin had shrunk. Then it was the turn of the Italians to struggle as they dropped off their foils in attack. The distance between them was now back up to 600 metres. But a bad tack by the Brits and they too were off their foils. Both teams were now in displacement mode on this last upwind leg. At this stage there was just 16 minutes left on the clock. In the end, the breeze refused to build, leaving Ineos Britannia half a leg away from the finish when the time limit expired. Frustration for the British, a save for the Italians. Minutes later, at 5 o'clock, racing for the day was called off. So even though there was no result, this was a race where the British had sent a message to the Italians. Well, a frustrating day, but I guess you must have taken quite a lot from it.
Yeah, it was, I think we've all done as sailors plenty of days like that where the wind is sort of flirting with that wind limit, and it was good to get the race away. I guess it was quite close to being able to finish the race and being enough wind. Maybe if we'd pulled that tack off, we'd have just got round, but ultimately we'll take the positives from the performance.
Which is more stressful, daylight today or daylight the first day in 20 knots of breeze?
Yeah, certainly different levels of, I guess, stress to the first day. The big breeze, you're certainly trying to look after the asset, and you're only one. The rudder comes out on a bearway, and you've probably written the boat off. Whereas today, certainly, a bit more just trying to keep it on the foils, and you're trying to stay calm because it's all about the small details.
And talking about keeping it on the foils, going through the tacks, and particularly the tacks look really difficult. And we heard, I think it was Ben who called for more pedalling on board. But when you go through a manoeuvre like that, and the cyclists are given all they can with all the pressure, and you haven't managed to get back up on the foil, how long does it take to then reset? I mean, can you just have another go at it? How long do you have to wait before you can have another big pump?
Yeah, we can go pretty soon. It's normally you've got to transition things like the system cant and stuff like that, because that's in a different spot for your straight line sailing versus takeoff. But yeah, we were certainly thankful as a cyclist digging us out of a few holes. I think we had a very light tack at one point, sat at 18 knots, which felt like forever, and they did a really good job. We could hear them giving it some behind us.
It seems like every time we see you guys go out, we see a different performance profile from both teams. It's quite confusing for us, to be honest, because we don't know where your sweet spot is. Does it feel like that to you? Are you surprised at how quickly both of you can reconfigure and be good in all conditions?
I guess that what maybe people don't see is just how incredibly hard the boats are to sail. And so there's so much performance from just being better at sailing them, and we saw in the AC40 some big difference in performance from identical yachts. So I think what we're seeing here is just everyone learning how to sail their yachts faster and faster.
Tricky day. What do you take away from today?
There's still a lot of lessons from today. Probably we didn't emphasize enough before the race how important was the starboard side, the right side of the course. I think there were like 2 knots of difference on wind speed from right to left, so we should have taken a little bit more risk to get the right side. So yeah, that's one lesson, and then plenty more of lessons when I will review the videos and the numbers with the coaches. Still a lot to learn from a day like today.
One of the other things that we're seeing with both teams is that each time you go out, you seem to have a different performance profile. Are you surprised at how much Ineos are changing their performance profile?
No, because I knew that during the semi-finals they faced a very strong light wind team, which was Alinghi. Alinghi, I think, had some great performance in the light wind. So they struggle at times against them, but they struggle against a team that was strong in the light. So no, I'm not surprised, but I still think that Luna Rossa has an edge, so I'm not worried at all.
Given that you're responsible for the flight and the trim, and given that we've seen breeze at both ends of the scale in just 2 days of racing, Which is hardest?
I mean, yeah, they're both on. Yeah, we've definitely seen the extreme ends of it, the bottom and the top, and they're just very different. You're right on the edge of, on the lower end of the wind speed limit, and kind of just keeping the kind of. It's more kind of, I guess, trimmer active in terms of like trying to keep the aero side of it working really well in those kind of conditions, and especially in the kind of manoeuvre exits, and making sure you're making the right decisions in kind of accelerating out of those manoeuvres. In the breezy end, it's much more kind of pilot orientated. On the stress level. So it just, I guess it switches quite dynamically between the different conditions. But yeah, feel like every time we get out there, we kind of learn at both ends of the spectrum, and it's great to get the time in.
You're trying to say you're stressed at both ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say you're always a bit stressed out there, but you kind of, the more time you get under your belt, the more it all becomes automatic, and I think everyone's just doing a great job on the team, and kind of really moving the game forward, and we're getting a lot of help in making sure that we're learning as much as possible, and it's a real huge team effort.
Is it a good thing, do you think? Is it an advantage perhaps, or a comfort even, that you've had these two extremes, that you've seen both ends of the spectrum so early on in the game? Does that help?
For sure, I think we can take confidence that we're competitive at both ends of the spectrum. I think we've got a really good chance of kind of pushing Prado. They've been the strongest team, I think, for a long time, but I think we're in a really good position now to be able to push them hard, and so we can take some confidence, and I think we've got a lot of confidence in our team that we can keep going and pushing hard and get some more wins under the belt, and looking forward to what's to come.
So the overall score remains at 1-1. Tomorrow we get to have another go. See you then.